welcome back to the Deeper Dive podcast. My name is Nate Bush, good to be the pastor at New City Church. And today I have a very special guest who gave the message this last weekend. I have my boy Jake with us. And so, Jake, introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do at New City Church.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name's Jake Rivera. I have the privilege of serving as the youth and family pastor here at New City Church. So my role and my joy is to serve the middle schoolers and the high schoolers and help them walk with Jesus and also their families and help them get to know Jesus better together.
All right. Man, I was so pumped to have you speak this last weekend, and I know you got a lot of positive feedback from the message as we,
Mhm.
explored the topic of students and mental health. And so, if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to the message yet, I encourage you to go back to it and listen to it. Um, it's there's a lot of data out there that says, hey, we're looking at a mental health crisis right now for young
Mhm.
people. In America in particular, but also it's a global phenomenon because social media, access to smart devices is more of a global phenomenon, not just targeted towards America. But that has certainly affected the mental health of students and children around the country. As you began to sort of work on the message, um, Jake, what was something that caught that maybe surprised you as you were beginning to prepare the talk about students and mental health that you quite frankly were like, oh, that surprises me, that catches me off guard. Was there anything in your preparation that caught you that way?
Yeah, I think one thing that really surprised me was just the high percentage of kids that were struggling with mental health. There was, I
Hmm.
mean, when I thought about like COVID, I thought like, oh yeah, that'd be an obvious, thing, and social media, yeah, sure. But when I just saw that it was just there were so many kids who were just suffering in silence, and only 20% or so were receiving any sort of care, and that was just like, whoa, that's a heavy thing. So that was something that really caught me off guard, is how many people were struggling and how little were actually receiving the help they needed.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons why maybe as parents we don't seek the help that our kids need. I mean, I have an 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, an 11-year-old, and so now
Hmm.
we've been through this high school journey once now, completed through, and we're in
Hmm.
it with another one, and we got a middle schooler in the house right now, and certainly we can see the mental health challenges that our own kids and our own home has faced. Uh,
Yeah.
I want you to speak to this idea and kind of the environment you're trying to create at New City Church specifically. But when we were talking in preparation for the message and talking about the text you used was the Good Samaritan, and we were talking about reasons why maybe even though we know our kids are struggling, there's a high percentage of our kids are struggling. If you have a high schooler or middle schooler in your home, they probably will struggle in at some point with their mental health. That's just it's just going to be very difficult to escape adolescence without having a mental health struggle.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the reasons that you and I were kicking around, like why don't we um, get our kids the help they need? And at least one of the reasons I think um, is associated with shame.
Hmm.
I think sometimes parents feel it. I know I have felt it when your child is struggling in life. It doesn't matter what the struggle is, but let's say they're struggling in life with an intimate issue like mental health. Something that you feel vulnerable about. It can be something that makes you a little bit, like you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to and talk about it in the home, and maybe even talk about it with your child. Certainly don't want to talk about it with your
Hmm.
friends. And shame can be a big part of that narrative. And so I know you were trying to press in on that a little bit in the talk. And so I just want to give you a second to speak to, anybody who might be listening who's going, you know what, that's something that's true for me. Like we probably need to be more aggressive in dealing with the mental health struggles of our kiddos, and we've been putting it off. And if we're honest, maybe shame is a part of that narrative. So, Jake, just as a
Yeah.
pastor to students at New City Church, Would you speak to those concerns and maybe provide a little bit of encouragement for our
Yeah, I
families?
think there's a song I've been listening to a lot. And honestly can't remember the name of it, but it's that I'm fine. You say I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm sure I'm fine. But I'm not. I'm broken. And I say it's under control when it's out of control,
Yeah,
and you know it. And the line
yeah,
says, "I don't know why it's so hard to admit it,
yeah,
because being honest is the only way to fix it." And every time I hear that song, I'm just like, oh, like I get chills. And I think
uh,
for folks who are just struggling with that shame, I think
yeah,
you're not alone, right? Like we shared the story of the Good Samaritan because we see people passed on the road every day, and sometimes they're in our house. I've got my oldest is 6, so I'm a young parent, but even my son is struggling with fear of failure, and he's expressed this fear that, like, what if I get it wrong, and it's not good to lose, and I don't want to make mistakes, and he's embarrassed to use an eraser on a pencil, and he's already picking up somewhere, and I'm embarrassed. I'm like, like, what did I do to make him feel that, and I kind of want to hide that. I want him to show, like, I'm good, I've got it. And I want parents to look at me and go, wow, you're such a good dad, and what a great pastor, and all this. And when I'm
yeah,
honest and I go, yeah, Josiah's really struggling with using a pencil, then other parents are like, mine too. And there's no shame, there's just this, like, community of me too, this is hard together. And so I think my word would be, the only way to fix it is to be honest, and to share in the grief together. I shared the story of Jesus with Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and they went to him when Lazarus died, and they demanded, why weren't you there? And they were grieving, and they were upset, and they were angry, and he didn't give them kind of, hey, heaven just got a new angel today, and this will all be okay someday, and you'll look back on this and smile. Jesus just wept. He wept with them. He wept with anger at this broken world that we live in,
yeah,
but he also wept with grief because of
yeah,
his friends who had lost a friend, and his good friend who died. Like, there was real grief, and I think he was just with them. And so
yeah,
my encouragement to you as a story is, you're not alone, and to believe you're alone, I think, pushes you into isolation. Because I'm alone, I'm embarrassed. I can't show my face until I've
yeah,
got it, and then what? I just never show my face. And
yeah,
so what we need is to be able to come. We had a student who
yeah,
came to our ministry last night and just was really honest about some real grief that she's been experiencing. I told her, I'm so glad you're here, even in your grief, because this is a safe place, and I want you to come and be real
hmm,
with me. And she said, I don't know how regularly I'll come. I said, great, like, you're loved when you can. And I think that's all of us need that encouragement.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that meeting was Wednesday night. It was Revive, and we have a great high school ministry, and couldn't be more thrilled to have Jake leading our high school students. And so, if you're listening to this, you get a high school student, and they're not in Christian
Mm.
community, and they need to be. Our student ministry is a place for them to be, and Jake is the leader that they need in their life. And so, if you're listening to this and you've been hesitant, and you've been like, I don't know, we got so much going on in our life. I promise you, there's nothing that better you can do for your kiddo than to get them into a Christian community where the word is the center of it, and because it's the word and the Holy Spirit that's going to give them
Yeah.
the strength to face the day, and
Real
you
quick
need
on
you need
that,
a leader
Nate.
like Jake in their
Yeah,
life.
and
All right, so
I'll add a
that's my
plug. I
little
was just,
plug
as you
for
were sharing,
Revive.
I was thinking of
Yeah,
Ecclesiastes 4, Ecclesiastes 4:9. He says, "Two are better than
yeah,
one. They have a good reward for their toil. If they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he
yeah,
falls, and he has no one to lift him up." And I think a lot of our students, as we were talking about students and mental health, they fall and they have no one to help lift them up,
yes,
or the people that lift them up are just thinking in the world standards. And so they
hmm,
say, if you can get this set of shoes, if you can get these friends, if you can
hmm,
make this team, if you can have this money, then you can stand up and be proud. But most of us just, we don't have that. And so, we want to provide a space where we can come with God's word, with the truth, with prayer,
yeah.
with encouragement, and we actually them up on solid footing.
Yes. All right. So a couple things to say about that. We're going to talk about connection next, and the need for deep connection. The key phrase in what has been shared so far is you're not alone. Your student's not alone. As a parent, you're not alone. If you are living with the presupposition that your children will make it out of your home unscarred by your parenting failures, that's a wrong presupposition. You're a fallible human being. You're gonna mess them up. I joke with my kids sometimes. I say, guys, it's not going to be whether or not you need whether or not you will need therapy. It's just what you're going to need therapy for is the question in our home. We're gonna mess you up. Okay, we're fallible human beings. We deeply love our kids, and so listen, you're not alone, and stop living with this presupposition that somehow you're going to be a perfect mom or a perfect dad in the home. You're not going to be. Jesus was perfect for us. Rest in his grace. Receive his righteousness. Admit your failures. And all that provides space and to be vulnerable, to be real, to be honest. And all those things are necessary for deep connection, within your parent groups at New City Church or wherever you are. But also, it's what's needed for your kids to be honest in the home is a place of grace. Now, deep connection was a major part of like, okay, this is helpful for kids and their brains, and for those of us who need a little bit of rehearsing of, okay, we got these like the under the stress and depression and just the anxieties of life. Some people tend towards like this emotional response. Some tends towards a logical response. You confess you're more of an emotional responder. I can sometimes be more of a logic responder under stress and duress. But why is deep connection so important? And maybe we'll land the plane after that, on what the Bible says about deep connection. But why is deep connection so important, and why is it important for our students to be
Yeah.
engaged with both our middle school bridge
Yeah,
on Sunday
well,
mornings and our high school revive,
the science, the data
gatherings?
shows that
Yeah,
when heavily rooted kind of depressive episodes, anxiety strikes, like Nate, you were saying, our brain kind of functions. God has wired our brain so that we fire on all cylinders. So our left brain's communicating with the right brain, and we're able to be logical and rational, emotional. And as kids grow up, we're kind of
yeah,
figuring that out. My mom used to always tell me, like, your frontal lobe isn't developed yet. Like, you're not ready. And I always hated that until I was out of
yeah,
college. But so when those things happen, our brain kind of separates a hair, and
yeah,
so, like you mentioned, we become one way or the other. And the data shows that the best way to reconnect the brain to close that gap is through human connection. Your presence. The authors of the book Seen, Dr. Chinwe Williams and Will Hutcherson, they say that
yeah,
the most effective healing mechanism for restoring that brain disconnection is human connection, is presence. And so, yeah, I mean, it's funny because our temptation is to fix. Well, you had this thing. Let's make that thing not a thing anymore. Like, how can I make that thing not a thing? And the reality is, there's no undoing that thing. That thing will now be a
yeah,
part of your student's
yeah,
history, and that's just the world we live in. That there's
yeah,
imprints that we have tattoos on our soul from things that happened when we're 3, whether we know it or not. But what changes, what heals, is when mom or dad or uncle or aunt or neighbor or somebody, friend, came along and said, "Can I just be with you in this?" And wrap our arm on us and let us cry and let us yell and let us do whatever. And we need that same thing. And so we really need people, as parents, I have to fight the temptation to fix my son's fear of failure and to be with him in it and to say, yeah, I don't like failing either. It's hard. And that forces me to like relive some of my own pain, which I don't like doing. And so like we kind of have to be with, that's something we all have to, it's a new muscle I think we have to build a little bit. But yeah, the data shows that that's really what people need, is not the fixing. And yes, like medication, yes, therapy, yes, all those other things, but your presence is really the highest probability to heal those wounds.
I'll say the hardest thing to do as a parent sometimes is
Yeah.
to, and I shouldn't say hardest. I mean, maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's a hard thing to do as
Mm-hmm.
a parent. Sometimes is to put the phone down, turn the television off, and be okay with like awkward silence. another difficult thing for me to do is my kids want to talk, but they only want to talk at bedtime. And so it's like I'm ready to wind down. I want to go to bed, and it's like, oh, it's our quiet kids are suddenly chatty Cathy's, the late at night and wanting to talk. And so it's very difficult sometimes to go, okay, this is a priority. Like this is on the, if I were to rank life experiences, this is one where I need to I gotta turn everything off. I gotta be present, sit at the edge of the bed, say, hey, let's go talk. And because those are times where that deep connection is
Yeah.
available. I don't know why that is, but teenagers tend to want to talk at
Hmm.
night when we're the most tired and worn out and wanting to turn our
Yeah.
brains off. And but being
Yeah.
available those times is
And I think
so
that's
so
another
important
muscle.
for their well-being, for that
Oh, sorry.
connection
I was just going to say, I
relationship
think
within
that's
the
another
home.
muscle we have to learn to
It
flex.
seems that God wired us up. Oh,
Is
go ahead.
presence,
Yeah,
right? Like, something for me, like you mentioned the
yeah,
phone. It's easy.
yeah,
So my mom used to always say when I was little, like
yeah.
guys have so many they'll spend in a day, and girls have this many words. And I can't remember the
Mm,
number, but it's one's way higher than the other. And for me, I come home and my words are spent. Like I'm
yeah,
out. I got like 3 words left, and it's like
yeah,
I love you. What's for dinner, and then I'm out. And then I'm kind of like
yeah,
checked out. And I've really had to train
yeah,
myself before I even pull into the house, just like take 5 minutes with the Lord and say,
yeah,
will you help me love my family, and to be so present. And so something that helps me is I physically change my
yeah,
clothes from my work clothes to home clothes. So I put on
mm,
like a workout shirt and sweats so that I'm just like, hey, I'm present. Like I physically have
mm,
changed my appearance so that I know I'm not working anymore. I have my phone set to do not disturb from 5 to 8 p.m. And so like if you need me,
yeah,
you're gonna have to call Jess. Because that helps me because and I leave it in another room. I put it on the
yeah,
charger upstairs, and it's just like physical things like that help me stay present. But that, I've been trying to work
yeah,
really hard on that for the last
yeah,
6 years, and I feel like I'm just starting to
yeah,
to get it in habit. But that takes us being so intentional with our time
yeah.
to say I'm going to be present. It's hard.
That's so good. Just kind of
Yeah.
pressing in on that a little bit. I think it's a good turn. Is talking a little bit about the kind of ways to practice presence, and certainly habits in the home are one way to practice presence. And you may not immediately connect
Mm.
the dots of that my practices in my home affect my kids' mental health.
Hmm.
But man, it thinking in terms of deep connection, thinking in terms of home connection, those can be very valuable habits to create around the home. Is just what's our relationship to our devices. And I'm a firmly Gen X, and so what that means is I had an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. And so as a parent, I have zero
Mm.
I have zero life experience to lean
Yeah.
on when it comes to teaching my kids how to have a relationship with their devices. And so I'm learning it along with them right now, like going, okay, what is our relationship with our computer? What's our relationship with our phone?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a conversation I think that every home needs to have, because it is the thing that's keeping us from having that deep connection. Is a conversation of like, what is our agreed upon family relationship to our devices? Uh, when do we use them? What are they good for? Um, you know, uh,
Yep.
it's always calling your
Yeah. And in the
attention.
book,
So how do you do that? I think it's a great
sorry,
sort of habit
in the book,
conversation to have
in
in the home for
scene, in the
sure.
book scene, he
Another thing I think
recommended,
that could
that you
be.
have
Go ahead, yeah, go ahead,
spaces,
yeah, speak to it.
where your phone's just not present. So like tables,
Yeah.
at the kitchen table, like they just don't, the phones don't even come into the dinner room. They just have them
Oh,
outside.
that's good.
So it's not a temptation. So Jess and I have started to say like, hey, because we've noticed, even with we have 6, 4, 2, and unborn, so we've got
Yeah.
a lot of young kids. And so I think they're really engaged with that. But if either Jess or I pull out my phone, behavior problems happen. Like
Hmm.
it's just they just know I'm not present, and so they goof off. And so we've decided, hey, we're gonna leave our phones on the other end of the kitchen when
Yeah.
during for this hour, and be just and that even if it's just silence, we're not talking about it because with a 6-year-old, But with your teenager, like they're
Yeah.
gonna be kind of over their spaghetti, just kind of hoping you don't have a hard question. And if you don't have your phone, it's kind of like you're like,
Yeah.
I want to know about your day. There's just we're distracting ourselves, I think, sometimes, and that
Uh
helps.
huh. Uh huh. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think to that point, we just we're not accustomed to having free space, in our minds. And it's uh, there's no limit to how we can occupy our minds, but some of the best conversations come from boredom.
yeah,
And you're so you create you have to facilitate an appropriate amount of boredom in your house, and the kids will hate you for it initially, when you go, you know what, like no television during these times, and no phones during these times, no devices. They're going to think that you are, you're asking them to play with sticks in the backyard. But there's something really great about boredom and what it facilitates in sort of free space in the mind, and the way it facilitates connection, because it forces you to pay attention to the people who are around you. And so, yeah, create
yeah,
create some strategic boredom in the house. That could be a great way of facilitating connection, because they'll have nothing else to do, uh, but to talk to you. A couple other things I think that are helpful, and I read a book years ago, that was really helpful for me, and it was intentional fatherhood. And John Tyson's the author of that book, and he talked about creating sort of these um, discipleship moments for your kids, strategic moments for your kids. So for me, for a year 10, I take the kids on a backpacking trip. Well, I took the boys on a backpacking trip. I took my daughter Evangeline golfing, so the boys felt like she got the an easier road. For the boy, because the boys were backpacking trip was pretty aggressive. So I think I might take Evie on a backpacking trip, just not the 10-year trip, because I think she feels like she missed out on an adventure there. For 13, we go on a foreign mission trip, and that's getting their eyeballs on the poor. And we talk on that trip about, hey, this is what we do as a family. It's who we are. We've postured our life in such a way that we want to care for those who don't know Jesus, and we want to care for those who are poor. And so, spending time globally in a context like that's really important. During 16 and 18, we have other trips. For 18, for Micah, recently for graduation, I had a kind of a men's night where I got some men together, and I gave each of the men a topic to speak into his life. We sat around the fire, we had some cigars, and he just was able to receive from these men wisdom and counsel, and that was kind of, hopefully trying to teach a posture of receiving that way. But I think we could all do good, Jake, and I'll give you some chance to tag into this too. I mean, your kids are on the younger scale, just from a parent perspective, but speaking from a pastor perspective, having these milestone moments that we create with our kids, places where we have intentional conversations and practice intentional presence, can also be a way of building that. So the weekly rhythms or daily rhythms of what we do with our phones, and how we treat our devices, and how we practice presence in the home, are all really important. But there are these other things that we can do and create. And I know that kind of sounds privileged, and to be able to go on a trip or go overseas on a foreign mission trip, but
yes,
we plan for that, and prioritize,
yeah,
for that. So there are things that we don't have in our house, because that's an important value for us. And so we have done that for each of our kids, and it's an important part of our discipleship journey with our students' lives. I don't know if
yeah,
you
yeah.
have
I
any
think
other
just
ideas in relation to
consistency
that, or just ways
and
to foster deep connection,
just
but
time.
just
I
go ahead
mean,
and feel
with
free to tag
little,
into
I
that,
wanted more
Jake.
of my dad. I wanted more time with my dad, and he was really a gifts person. He wanted to give me toys and stuff, and that was cool. But like, I'd rather throw the baseball around. Just these
Yeah.
things that are permanent. A story for me is COVID was really good for our family because my daughter didn't know me. My Mercy was about two. Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah. So she's about almost two when COVID hit. And I remember one day I came home and I went to give her a hug, and she just looked at me like I was a stranger. She wouldn't touch me. She wouldn't be near me. She was super uncomfortable. And I was like, Jess, why won't Mercy be around me? And she said, she doesn't know you. You're never home. I was always I was working in college
Uh,
ministry at the time. And so every night of the week, I had a Bible study or a student meeting or something.
yeah.
And I was always busy and
Uh,
I was never home. And she's like, she just doesn't know you. And then COVID hit and everyone was home all the time. And that wasn't great for everybody, but for me, it was a blessing because I got to be around my daughter more. And um, I noticed that that really saved our relationship. I was home for dinner every night. I was home for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. But even after that, we said in our house, Dad's home for dinner. There's one night a week I miss dinner. That's it. And that's like a rule for us. Is I'm home for dinner. And even if that's just from 5 to 6, 5 to 7 or whatever it is really, really important for our family. The temptation was when the veil kind of lifted off of the restrictions and stuff, it was really easy to be like, well, I can start making more appointments for dinners. And I can, and my wife, I'm so thankful for her. She's like, no, you can't. This is important time. And so it could be just as simple as that, as saying every Saturday, I like to go disc golfing. Every Saturday, I take my son with me to go disc golfing. And so we go out for an hour every Saturday, and we throw 9 holes, and we come home, and we laugh, and we tell stories, we get mosquito bites, and then we go home and we have a snack. And so that just that kind of consistent, and that doesn't cost me a penny, but it's such a worthwhile time investment in our relationship.
So good. All right. So I want to sum it up and go back to the beginning of what we talked about today. First off, you're not alone. If you have a kid that's struggling with their mental health, I want to encourage you to seek out help that way, a Christian counselor if that's needed for them in their life. I know that we've got on our resource page some places that can help you get started in that journey. But I want to encourage you not to delay. Seeking help if help is needed, and also like not to feel ashamed about that. I mean, it's the right thing to do if that's what's needed in your home, and hopefully you feel a lot of freedom at New City. We say no perfect people allowed, and at our church, and so man, you are free to admit failure and to seek help, by the way, it's not a failure if your kid's struggling with mental health. We don't just immediately take that internally too, but just seek help, but also foster deep connection. I think that's really, really important. And one of the ways you can foster deep connection, I'm going to be shamelessly plugging here our middle school and high school ministry, is one of the ways you can foster that is by getting your students involved in the ministry at New City. And so we have whether it be one of our collective events or being the bridge on Sunday mornings or the Revive High School gathering. I want to encourage you to do what it takes to get your kid in Christian community. And if you have to fight to get them to church, it's a worthy fight. I mean, it really is. And in our home, it's something that we don't compromise on. I've told our sports coaches, like we don't. Unless it's a game, and we're not like Pharisees about this, but if it's just practice, our kids go to youth group. That's just the way we do it in our home, and have from the very beginning. And I think it's because we want to communicate to our kids that's a value, and so that's not to shame anybody. It's just encourage. I just want to encourage you
Yeah,
that's a
and
big
just to echo
value.
what you
And
said,
if it's not a value for
just
you yet,
be
make
present,
it one for you
bring
in
your
your home.
kids. We want to
Jake,
love your
anything to
kids. Let me
close us
help
out?
serve your kids. You're not alone.
Man, thank you guys so much for listening to Deeper Dive Podcast. Great job this last weekend, Jake. Really was encouraging to hear from you. As always, if you need to reach out to Jake for pastoral help in the home, he's available to you. Man, really glad you guys tuned in today for the Deeper Dive Podcast. We'll see you next time.